Yes, I've always been curious about the Patois language and where it originates from. So I've gone through all the research and I've come up with a few ideas. So let me put my glasses on. So in this particular series, I will be examining the grammatical processes of languages, compare and contrast regional dialects, accents, the evolution of languages, slangs, and cultural expressions. There are some simple expressions used in Jamaica and different regions in the United Kingdom, and I've noticed that they are similar. A dialect is basically a form of language that is specific to a particular region or group. And the definition of a dialect is basically a variety of language which has a different pronunciation, grammar, or vocabulary than the standard language of the culture. For example, a dialect in Patois in our Jamaican language is basically similar to Cantonese in Chinese. So Jamaicans, we speak Patois, and a Chinese person would speak, for instance, Cantonese. The light is overpowering, but never mind. The computer is on. Right. It is a well-known fact that Patois descended from English and is referred to as an English-based Creole with West African influences. Now, Jamaican Patois is locally known as Jamaican Creole by linguistics, and it was developed in the 17th and 18th centuries through contact between African slaves and English slave owners. So during the early 17th and 18th century, the British brought slaves from West Africa to work on sugar plantations. And Patois was spoken primarily among the Jamaican diaspora at the time, spoken, majority of Jamaicans. But most of these slaves, they adapted the English dialects spoken by their slave masters. And this resulted in the development of the pidgin language. So what is the pidgin language as I was checking? The pidgin language is basically a grammatically simplified means of communication that developed between two or more groups that do not have a language in common. So for instance, the vocabulary, if my vocabulary and your grammar are similar, we combine them together and we draw from several languages. Basically, it's descended from English, but the term pidgin English actually refers to categories developed when speakers of different languages come together and have a need to communicate. So in order to work together, they need to adopt a common language. So the pidgin language was created through contact with colonial European languages, English, French, Spanish, Dutch, Portuguese, and those sort of things. Now, a majority of non-English loan words came from the Akan origin, which is a all complete, primarily Jamaican, and it's just a central Taino language. And oh my God, it's saying that it's a native language of the Akan people of Ghana. So our languages came from Africa, also known as Tri. It's spelled TWI, and it's a group of dialects within the Central Taino branch of the subfamily of Africa. Yeah? But my curiosity now, English was the language spoken by the early ancestors, slave masters, and they spoke different dialects of English. So what I did now, I took the liberty of researching the English culture. So I need to know where English originate from. So I'm just gonna browse and have a look. Right, the creation of the English nation English was originated in England during the Anglo-Saxon period and is now spoken as a first or second language in many countries of the world. The Anglo-Saxons were a cultural group who inhabited England from the 5th century. They comprised people from Germanic tribes who migrated to the island from continental Europe, their descendants, and indigenous British groups who adopted many aspects of Anglo-Saxon culture and language. Now, the Anglo-Saxon established the Kingdom of England. Can you believe that? And the modern English language owes almost half of its words, including the most common words of everyday speech, to their language. The Anglo-Normans were the medieval ruling class in England, composed mainly of a combination of ethnic Anglo-Saxons, Normans, Bretons, Flemings, Gascons, and French. So this was all following the Norman conquest. The Anglo-Norman, also known as Anglo-Norman French, was a dialect of Old Norman French that was used in England. So they weren't using English at the time, they were using Old Norman French that was used to a lesser extent elsewhere in Great Britain and Ireland during the Anglo-Norman period. So Old English had four main dialects associated with particular Anglo-Saxon kingdoms: Mercian, Northumbrian, Kentish, and that is just history really. But basically, the language at the time was Old English, which is the earliest record form of the English language spoken in England and southern and eastern Scotland in the early Middle Ages. You see? Yeah, so that is basically where English come from. It was brought to Great Britain by the Anglo-Saxon settlers in the mid-5th century, and the first Old English literary work date from the mid-7th century. So after the Norman conquest of 1066, English was replaced for a time as a language of the upper classes by the Anglo-Norman, a relative of the French. The French is always involved. This is regarded as marking the end of the Old English era. So during this period, the English language was heavily influenced by Anglo-Norman, developing into a phase known as Middle English. So from Old English to Middle English. So Middle English was a form of the English language spoken after the Norman conquest of 1066, and Middle English was spoken right up until the 15th century. So the Anglo-Saxon settlement of Britain is a process which changed the language and culture of most of what became England, from Romano, British to Germanic. So the Germanic speakers in Britain themselves were of diverse origins, eventually develop a common cultural identity as Anglo-Saxons, you see. So as the Anglo-Saxons became dominant in England, their language replaced the languages of the Roman Britain. And basically, this process principally occurred from the mid-5th century, following the end of Roman rule in Britain around the year 1410. So in contemporary Britain, British English is a standard dialect that we use today as spoken and written in the United Kingdom. So no doubt, English is the first language of the majority of the population in a number of countries, including Jamaica. Now, as the result of colonization, which I'll talk about with Miss Louise Bennett poetry, that's about our Jamaican folklore, and historical migrations of English-speaking population and the predominant use of English as the international language of trade and commerce, English also became the most widely used second language. So after telling you all about that, now I think it's time to tell you about the similarities of the languages. Now, as I said before, the dialect is a form of language that is specific to a particular group or region of people, yeah? And it is a well-known fact that Patois descended from English and is referred to as an English-based Creole language with West African influences. Now, Jamaican Patois is locally called Jamaican Creole by linguists, but it is spoken primarily by the Jamaican diaspora, and these slaves, they spoke the dialects of their slave masters, and this resulted in the development of Pidgin English. They were very smart, They adopted a basic vocabulary of English words and put them together in a simplified form, and that resulted in the native language called Patois. So where am I going with this? I need to tell you what the pidgin language is. Really, it's drawn from several languages, as I said before. So a group of people come together and they put all these together. You understand? So let me talk a little about a bit more about the official language used in Jamaica. It's not really Patois. If somebody was to ask you what language you speak, we would say English, because Patois is not recognized yet as a language. I don't understand why, but Jamaican Patois, I am coming, normally would say, may I come? I'll be there shortly, me soon come. How you do? How they do? And what's happening? What? It's just to cut the language short, basically. You know? Now, Louise Bennett spoke about the rhythm of the language. Let me have a look at what she said about the rhythm of the language. Louise Bennett is our Jamaican poet and activist from Kingston, Jamaica, very cultural icon. Although she lived in Toronto, Canada for the last decade before her death, she still received the homage of expatriate West Indian community in the north, as well as the large Canadian following. And she was described as Jamaica's leading comedian, as the only poet who really hit the truth about society. Through its language, she raised the dialect of the Jamaican folk lore to an art level which is acceptable to and appreciated by Jamaicans home and abroad. Now, she spoke something about colonizing in reverse, and this emphasizes the idea of leaving one's home country to start a new life somewhere else. And her contribution to Jamaica cultural life was that she was honored as the MBE. I admire this lady, because she was very popular with Jamaica culture and dialect. She was married in 2002. No, sorry, she was married in 1954 and her husband died in 2002. And that was basically, I'll tell you some more about Louise Bennett later on. But she spoke of the rhythm of the Patois language. So Patois is really an English-based Creole. And although the French claim that it's a corruption of the English language, Jamaica is recognized as a very good African word. 3. That's the language that our Jamaican Patois stem from. So the English would say, I got stuck by a prickle, and Jamaican would say, Maka juke me, Banker is a language come from 3. It just means basket, and nyam. When you say nyam, sound like a dreadful word, but it means eating in the Akan language. And some of the common expressions that we used to greet each other with, like, how are you? We say, howdy do, or wagwan, are typical. Some people say, see you later. We say, look more, tomorrow if life spare, and stuff like that. And in many parts of the UK, however, most people speak a version of English that nobody cannot understand. We call pants trousers in Jamaica. Here in the UK, we say trousers. Flannel, we say rag, rag that you bathe with is flannel. Grandma, we say nan. Slippers, we say flip-flop. But in Birmingham and the Black Country, they are well known for their words and phrases as well as their distinctive accents. But although their accents sound very familiar, there are notable differences in their regional dialects, words, and phrases. Now, the Black Country dialect is spoken by many people in the Black Country region, covering most of the four metropolitan boroughs of Dudley, Sandwell, Walsall, and Wolverhampton. Yeah, so like I was telling you before, the English was originated in England during the Anglo-Saxon period, and it's I've noticed the similarities. For instance, in contemporary Britain, the British English is the standard of the English language as spoken and written in the UK. But listen now, the Brummie, when people come from Birmingham, they've got a very distinctive accent. So a Birmingham person, the natives Birmingham, they would refer to them as Brummie. So instead of saying like baby, a typical word as baby, they say bab, and it's also a term of endearment for females. So instead of saying you're right, love, they say you're right, bab. Boss, they say buzz with Z. Tap water, they call it council pop. And instead of saying here you are, they say yeah. And tea, in Jamaica we have tea in the morning time, lunch, and then dinner. But tea for people in the Black Country is around 6-7 o'clock. So tea for them is dinner. Yeah. And yes, I'm just gonna scroll down and have a look at instead of saying happy, 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 they say happy or silly for silly. Price, price. Guy, goy. Shy, shoy. You know, they use strange phrases. So if they really like someone, they said, you're my mocha. And if they cry, they say, you're blotting. And if instead of saying, I think so, with pronouncing the TH, they say, I think. FINK, they say, think. You know, when I first moved to Wolverhampton, I initially could not understand the accent. Something as simple as a simple form of greeting, like how are you? They say how am ya. So in Wolverhampton, they call Wolverhampton people yam yam. So how are you instead of how are you, they say how am ya. Or are you coming? Am ya coming? My next door neighbor, me next door neighbor. So no form of English. Instead of saying, are you okay? All right, mate? You've been all over the place. They say you've been all around the Wrekin. And if they're asking a question, you didn't get anything? You day? You day. So instead of saying, didn't, you day, or did you? A day. A day mean I didn't. You understand? The little one, they say the little one. The big one, they say the big one. And instead of saying goodbye, they say ta-ra rabbit. Now, London, when I first traveled to London, the southern accent in the east end of London, they call it the Cockney. And the Cockney is basically the absence of standardized English, which they also call received pronunciation. Now, in the southeast of London, they use the term to refer to, they call it the glottal stop, because it's a sound of obstructing airflow in your vocal tract. So instead of saying water, they say water. So people in the southeast of London, they don't sound T. You never hear if they say potter, they say potter, better, sitter, letter, kettle, bitter. You know, so in similar vein, the letter H, they don't sound, the H is never pronounced. Is for hand, is and, him, hello, hello, head, ed, and stuff like that. So they don't speak English. Liverpool, you call them the Scouser. When I went to Liverpool, the Scouse is an accent and a dialect of English originating in it's in the northwest of Merseyside, a metropolitan county in northwest England. Now, people from Liverpool, you call them Scousers, Scousers, and the Scouse accent is highly distinctive and has a very little in common with those of the neighboring regions. So instead of saying hello, they say aya. Breakfast, they cut it short and say brekkie. Brother or sister, they say orchid. Going to the hospital, you're going to the Aussie, OZZY. They call the police the busies. And if they're busy, they say I'm chocker. Yeah. Shoes, they call them webs. If somebody is drunk, they say he's bevied. Asking for a cigarette, they say give me a bifter. And here you are, they say yeah. Girlfriend, they call them. A man will refer to his girlfriend as a bird. My bird, me bird. Yeah, man, if you're in a bad mood, they say you got a carbon. Instead of saying my mate, they say me mate. So my become me. Yeah. So no formal English there. And if you want to remember something, like if you're thinking about something, they say give your head a wobble. If they're feeling devastated, they said I'm devoured. So basically, although the Black country has a rich traditional dialect, the language spoken does not consist of any standard English. For instance, pronouns, instead of saying my, them say me. You understand? In Jamaica, you'd said you for one person, but for more than one, we say uno. But uno come from an African language called Akan or Tri, Twi. To outsiders, the Black country speech sounds very distinctive, but it is often difficult to understand. The dialect is essentially Anglo-Saxon and closer to Old English than anywhere else in the United Kingdom. So remember I told you earlier about the Middle English and Old English. Old English was before the Anglo-Saxons came and replaced the Middle English. So basically, all that is saying that the dialect is essentially Anglo-Saxon and closer to Old English than anywhere else. So, and I do agree, because most people in the Black country, they will more or less refer to house as uzen or folks as fokon. Fokon. Brummy is an English dialect that is spoken in the West Midlands of Birmingham in the UK, and basically these people, those who speak with the accent, have a tendency to end sentences in a downbeat or a lower octave, which may be interpreted, less attractive to a listener. Now, in Wolverhampton, the Black Country dialect is spoken by many people in the region, covering the 4 metropolitan boroughs of Dudley, Sandwell, Walsall, and Wolverhampton. People who live in the Black Country have their own dialect and vocabulary, as opposed to just being a different accent. Instead of saying good morning, they say hey up or aya or hello cocker, hello duck, hello chicken, Yeah, so if you come in the Black country and you're going to say hello to somebody, say aya, aya, you more right, stuff like that. And for saying goodbye, they say see you later, tarara bit, tarara bit. A Midland phrase meaning goodbye. That's all that is. But in London now, the main difference is the glottal stop. The T is missing. They don't say kettle. They say kettle. They drop off. The London people from the southeast, they don't sound the T. So water, matter, better, computer, doctor. You understand me? Yeah. The difference with these languages that Patois was developed in the 17th century when slaves from West Africa were exposed to nativized dialectal form of English spoken by the slave owners. But despite all that, Patois its own phonology, vocabulary, and distinctions, Its Creole status has never been regulated. Patois has been influenced by English, French, Spanish, and West African languages. So why on earth it is being considered as incorrect English or improper speech by the French? Most French people call it corrupted gibberish. Corrupted gibberish. Oh my God. Incorrect English or improper speech. Make me wonder. The Creole is what French people call the corrupted gibberish that brown people speak in the colonies. When all is said and done, Patois may not receive any recognition. Nevertheless, I can see that purposeful work has been accomplished over the centuries. Suffice to say that we are descendants of enslaved Africans brought here by colonists. Patois reflects the struggles of slaves and ancestry from African and European colonization and influence through the history of Jamaica. Our forefathers were able to use the English dialect spoken by their slave masters in order to develop the pidgin language, and that is a work of genius. It was by adopting the basic vocabulary of English words and using simplified grammar that they formulated the native language of Patois. How awesome is that? And the bottom line is Jamaica became one of the jewels in the English crown because of the fabulous prosperity it brought to the English plantation owners, directly and indirectly to cities such as Liverpool, Bristol, and all those places that service the trade with Jamaica and the rest of the British Caribbean, which was also called the West Indies. And that to me is very awesome. So the next chapter I'm gonna be debating is the languages, and I'm gonna talk about Louis Bennett more and about the colonial rule and how the colonial rule, Jamaica was coming out of colonial rule in the 1962, and now it emerged into a new identity. So keep watching, because my next series will be about colonization in reverse. So thanks a lot for your time. Keep watching, keep subscribing, and I hope you're taking in everything that I'm saying, because all this is jam-packed. It's an extensive study of Jamaica Patois, and I've merged it and compare and contrast the difference with English and Jamaican languages, and it just beggars belief that Jamaica Patois wasn't given any recognitions. Look at this. It said in history, speakers of mutually unintelligible languages have been brought into contact, develop a totally new language that is not native to any culture. Therefore, were unable to communicate with each other, and Jamaica made it into a sort of pidgin language. They caused languages to come together, combine together, and create a completely new languages. How awesome is that? How awesome is that? It's like, instead of saying something is weak, we say something is fenke fenke, or something is so-so. So that means it's ordinary, it's not of any relevance. Or if we say somebody's a susu, that means they're gossiping. So yeah, the language is a reflection of humans' linguistic ability, and if you study the grammatical process of these languages, you learn about linguistic history and psychology. So it is awesome. So keep subscribing, and I'm gonna look examine more about the colonies and sort of expand on Louis Bennett idea of colonization in reverse. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Keep telling a friend about this channel, because it's something that you can learn. You can learn You can learn the Pidgin language, Jamaican Creole, and you can compare and contrast the difference between the Black Country dialect, the Scouse dialect, which is in Liverpool, and the Brummie, which is in Birmingham, and the Yam Yam, which is in Wolverhampton, and the Cockney, which is in London. And imagine, you see, when you compare those languages, it's not standard English, but yet still, the language is recognized as a language. And that, to me, is something to think about. So thanks for your time. Keep watching, keep subscribing, and tell your friends about it. Keep pressing that subscribe button and learn something new every day. Take care now. Bye-bye.